Good afternoon. This is Anthony Michels calling from the Netherlands, and today I would like to talk with you about why do we have usury? And this may seem like a bit of a strange question because it is so normal nowadays. It's everywhere now. It's completely the norm, and we might think that it was just the normal human condition forever, but this is absolutely not the case. And until 1500, we had usury prohibition in Europe. And I won't say that it was completely non-existent at the time, because there was always illegal money lending. There was always a desire by moneylenders to make a profit, and they were always complaining about all the risks involved, and they were always involved in Ponzi schemes and in all sorts of schemes to make money with money. But there was also a very strong societal prejudice against it, and this was simply Christianity, because Mosaic law very directly outlaws usury. It's very strongly against usury. The prophets in all sorts of texts in the Bible, in Scripture, strongly condemn usury. And there's one quote by Jeremiah, I think it was, that he was complaining, why does everybody hate me? I have never taken usury, nor have I paid any usury. So this was how he was trying to ingratiate himself with the Israelites, to no avail, of course. But that gives you an idea of how strongly these people felt against usury, and how strongly Christianity is against usury. And after Rome collapsed in the 5th century BC, after Christ, in Anno Domini, in the resulting European civilization, known as the Dark Ages, because, as we know, history is written by the victors, and the winner is the bank. So the bank writes history, and of course calls a usury-free economics driven society a dark age. And Rome, which was a brutal civilization of tax farming, slavery, invasion, and money lending at high interest, that was Rome. That was civilization. That was a bright era for the money lenders. And then the interest-free economy in Europe was a dark age. And then we have modernity, which is supposedly humanity's march to where we are today. You know, all very progressive and very wealthy due to capitalism. And this is the basic narrative of the bank, and it's all nonsense, of course, as always. So there was a usury-free economy in Europe after Rome, and try to think about this, how bizarre this is, because money lending and slavery and ruthless invasion, that was Rome. That's how these people operated, and it was a very brutal society. And Rome was also basically the global homo of its day, because everybody was sucked into it and was Romanized. And just as the American Empire has brought us all consumerism and Coca-Cola and all the social degeneracy that we all hate today, so did Rome. And everybody was supposed to become Romanized. And if you held on to your tribal ways, then you had no chance in Roman society. And Rome is also very notorious for warring on the tribes. What they did to tribes in Gaul, in Spain, in Germany was really quite terrible, and it was all about rape and destroying autonomy, destroying sovereignty, destroying local power centers. Empire is always against this, and it goes on today, because my old friend Morris, who died a few years ago, one of his main points, his main talking points, and very important talking points, was that the fact that there are still viable tribal associations in the Middle East, that was one of the key reasons for the invasion by the American Empire and the Zionists, of course. And this is very important, and this was ongoing under Rome. And but eventually Rome was crushed by after a 1,000-year war with the Germanic tribes. And the Germans never gave up, and the Romans never managed to overcome the Germans. They tried once with this famous invasion by Varus, and he got destroyed by Arminius, and who managed to unite the German tribes, and that was the last time that the Romans actually tried to dominate Germany. And after 1,000 years of constant mutual invasions, the German tribes overcame Rome, and that was again a truly European society, because Rome, of course, is also very strongly connected to in ancient times anyway, in the early days of its rise, it was very strongly connected to the Middle East. And basically remnants of the Bronze Age collapse founded Rome, because in Roman lore you will read that Aeneas, who was a survivor of the Battle of Troy, the Siege of Troy, that he moved on with a couple of friends to Italy, and that they were the forebears of the Roman Empire. So there's a direct link between Bronze Age and Rome, and the Bronze Age is where all this Moloch worship comes from, and all the usury, the slavery, the gold kings. That's a direct lineage, and that's also where we're heading with the New World Order, because there's going to be a gold king who will rule the world not so far from now. That's where we're at, and all this is very relevant, because usury is there, as we have been discussing at infinite length, at real currencies is their main power base. The financial system is the power base. It's the heart of Babylon. It's the actual world power. It has dominated all Gentile states, all states, through usury, simply through lending. And you can read about this in their own texts. They make jokes about it. How they would lend to the king, and after 20 years at 5%, the entire debt would have been paid in usury, and the debt was still outstanding. And this is a huge source of amusement for the conspirators. And of course, it is insanely ridiculous. The idea that a sovereign state can be in debt to bankers is completely insane, and it's completely obvious that when major states like the United States or Italy or Britain or whatever are profoundly indebted, totally indebted to bankers, that they are completely controlled by them. That's a no-brainer, and it's bizarre that this has been allowed to be how it is, and that it is simply completely ignored by everybody. So, but this is the way it is, and it was not always like this. It was a very strange situation that you had this brutal civilization known as Rome, and that after Rome fell, that both slavery and usury were over in Europe. There was no slavery in Europe after the fall of Rome, and neither was there usury. So this Christian civilization that was built on the ruins of Rome was a huge leap forward for humanity, and this shows because all the elegant buildings we see that we still see, like for instance the cathedrals, were built in those days and were built with the technology and the intent of these people. And this was also what we can see nowadays, that there is a clear breach also in architecture, and the housing is of very low quality, and the buildings that major corporations and states make are very soulless. And these buildings of Christianity were far from soulless. They were very beautiful, and they're still visited by millions of people every year. So how did this come about? This is a great question. And why was usury prohibition subverted? Why was it destroyed? How did it happen? That's the question. And 1500, this is the era around which this happened. Of course, this was not a matter of one day. This was a centuries-long process in which usury was first very strongly forbidden. Everybody frowned upon it, hated it, saw it as the work of the devil, until say maybe 1700, 1750, that usury is becoming very settled and very accepted and very much the norm. And this happened mostly via Holland and the UK. These were the two main culprits, and the Bank of Amsterdam, the Amsterdamse Wisselbank, the Amsterdam Exchange Bank. That's basically what it was. It was the core central bank of the Amsterdam Empire, which was for a century, say from 1580 until 1680 thereabouts, the main power in Europe, together with France. But Holland was a very small country, and but very powerful because of its financial shenanigans. So was also in control of the world currency, world reserve currency at the time. The Dutch guilder, the florin, was it was the Europe, the world reserve currency, especially anyway in Europe, which was at the time the center for the world, of course. So and in many ways still is. And so this is the question: how did it happen? How did it come about? And why did it happen? And of course, there are many reasons. There's not just one reason, but for instance, one reason has been extensively discussed by Michael Hoffman in his masterpiece, The Usury in Christendom, which is a very important book, and which explains and which investigates and reports on the societal discussions at the time. So there was very strong, and the Bible is very clear about usury prohibition. Usury is sin, full stop. And usury was also very strongly associated with Moloch worship, because that was the enemy of the Israelite people. And they attacked the Moloch worshippers with the Canaanite invasion, which led to the Bronze Age collapse. We've been discussing this elsewhere. But this is what happened at the time. And Moloch worship is associated with usury, and usury is associated with Moloch worship. And usury was very strongly condemned by Mosaic law and outright forbidden. So and in the 14th century, 15th century, you had all sorts of mind controllers, because things were very much the same back then as they do today. You know, the rich would have slight people, intellectuals, yada, yada, yada. They would give them money so that they could come up with all sorts of rationalizations, all sorts of subversions of very clear biblical texts, scriptural condemnations of usury, etc. So they were gnawing away at this usury prohibition, and this was a very strong central social policy of the Catholic Church. So it could not be done away with just overnight, but as Michael Hoffman explains, with gradualism, and they were gnawing away at usury prohibition, as he puts it, and I think very strongly puts it that way, and convincingly so. So that was a very important part of it. They were just attacking this usury prohibition because the moneylenders wanted to get back in the saddle. That was what was going on. The position that they had lost with the collapse of Rome, and before then Carthage and other outlets, the Phoenicians with the Amorite leftovers, and yeah, they were still very much involved in usury. The Carthaginian financiers survived the Carthaginian destruction by Rome, and settled in Rome, and later moved on to Venice, which is Phoenicia. These are the same things. And they were gnawing away at this usury prohibition, very much in Italy to begin with, in the 14th century to begin with, the Medici, but also several other banking families in Italy, in these city-states. They would basically conquer the papacy in the 14th century. You had a couple of Medici scions who were, made pope. So yeah, that's about the worst thing that you can have, a moneylender, which is obviously Mammon and in charge of the Holy See. So, and it also goes back that long, 700 years ago, 600, 700 years ago, you had the first Medici popes. So that's how long Christianity has been already top-down controlled by the moneylenders. But what I want to discuss with you first and foremost today is a point that Michael Hoffman didn't mention. Michael Hoffman is very much involved in the scriptural exegesis of the whole thing, but and the societal debate. But I'm first and foremost interested in the economics of it all, and there was also a very strong economic situation that the money lenders used to get usury back into Europe. And this issue was credit scarcity. Because there was usury prohibition, there was credit scarcity in the economy, because the rich would not lend without interest on loans of money. So this was a very real problem in medieval Europe, because at that stage, after the collapse of Rome, there was a long period of less economic development. And there was I won't say, I made a joke about how the money lenders would call an interest-free economy a dark age, but there was also a lot of destruction after the fall of Rome. And so it was not complete garbage, but after maybe 1000 AD is when you start seeing real economic growth and real growth of cultural expression in Europe. And so we have a period of 500 years between 1000 AD, 1500 AD, where you have immense growth in Europe of everything, of societal institutions, of cities, of markets, of trade, etc., etc. And credit scarcity was limiting this growth, and this was a real issue. And this also then is what was used by the moneylenders. And I'll give you a very strong example of this. It's a text by Francis Bacon of usury. He had a screed of usury, and Francis Bacon, of course, was a Freemason and Rosicrucian, etc. So he knew exactly. He was one of the top guys in the 17th century, in the 16th century, one of the most influential people, and obviously a mega intellect. Let there be no doubt about that. But also very much involved with the powers that be, and he was doing their bidding, no doubt about that. And he wrote this screed of usury, and this was a defense for money lending at interest. And he had a very. He started out very. Directly, I mean, in the second sentence or so. Let me look it up here. Yeah. I say this only, that usury is a concessum propter duritem cordis. For since there must be borrowing and lending, and men are so hard of heart, as they will not lend freely, usury must be permitted. This is what Francis Bacon said at the time. And let's break this down. For since there must be borrowing and lending, and this is a very important point that I want to stress, because Francis Bacon is correct with this. There must be borrowing and lending. There is a huge demand for credit in society, always. And today it is extreme. We're now in the West at the terminal phase of the of a debt bubble that has been blowing up over the last 50 years, and it looks really like this. And we're now in this stage where it goes up like this. Like exponential growth always looks like this, and we're now in this stage. So that growth of debt is now completely unsustainable. Every yearly iteration is now so huge that it's simply. It's over. It's unsustainable now, and that's where we're at. That's why we're at this crucial juncture now in the West, because a massive deleveraging is coming our way. But there must be borrowing and lending, and there is a real demand for credit in the economy, and especially for business credit. Also other forms of credit, but especially business credit. And a business starts, and there's capital, but there's also lack of capital at the beginning of a business. That's intrinsic, and people need credit to start this business and to expand this business. And this was also the key issue at the time. And I make a real point of this because there are very many people who say that debt is also a problem. And I'm not saying that debt is great. because it's better to not be in debt, but it is not a sin to be in debt. It's weakness, and it's better to be avoided. But credit is intrinsic in our economic constitution as a species, and therefore this is why it's so important that we get a clear view of this, and that we organize it correctly, because that's where it all went wrong. Because there must be lending, but borrowing and lending, but he then continues, men are so hard of heart as they will not lend freely. Usury must be permitted. And this is because, yeah, Jesus, of course, in Luke 6:34, very clearly says, lend freely, expecting nothing in return. That's what Jesus had to say about this. And this is not what people do. People are very money conscious, and it's getting less and less and less. That's definitely a trend in humanity. Hearts are softening in our kind, and this is a very great thing. It's not universal, but it's a very strong trend with many people, and there's a very profound changes are happening in humanity. But this is very important. But this is where we come from: hard hearts, and the desire to make money with money, or to make money in whatever way possible, really. And this hard hearts is also a very quaint formulation by Bacon. And with this, he clearly refers to this famous parable by Jesus about the wicked servant who hated his master, and who was given a talent to keep for his master, because his master was on the road, and when he returned, what he expected from his servants was that they had made good use of the money and provided him with growth. But he meant this in a reasonable way, it transpired, because the master then asks on the servant, why is it still one? Why did you do nothing with it? Because the wicked servant had buried it in the ground and dug it up when his master returns and returned it to him. So he did nothing positive with the money. He just kept it in a safe place. And his master asked, why didn't you use it in a positive way? And then the servant basically accused him of yeah, well, you know, I was afraid that you would be angry if I lost it all, so I just kept it in a safe place for you. And basically implying that he was afraid of him, and that he was a tough master to live under. And then Jesus tells him, or has the master say, well, if you really thought that I had such a hard heart, you should have put the money in a bank, and so that I would have gained interest from it. And this is a very important parable also in usury-free economics, because some wicked people, to keep in that vein, like for instance our great defender of usury, Gary North, in his rants about how all this money lending is so fantastic and purely free market, etc., etc. He will tell you that this is actually a validation of putting money in the bank by Jesus. But obviously, it's what Jesus says. If you really thought that I had such a hard heart, which is of course anathema to any Christian, a Christian is supposed to have a gentle heart, then you should have put the money into the bank, because the key lesson here is not about usury at all. It is about what it means to be a good servant. And to be a good servant, and obedience and being a good servant is a very high value. Make no mistake about this. We live in a very egotistic time frame where everybody wants to be a leader, and where people in school are trained to be leaders, you know. And yeah, but the fact of the matter is that a good leader is a good servant. And if you're not a good servant, you can never be a good leader. And what does it mean to be a good servant? What Jesus is teaching us here is that it means to be a good servant, that you try to think what your master wants, and that that you then act accordingly, even if you think it's wrong yourself. This is what Jesus is basically saying. And it's a very important life lesson that merits a lot of contemplation. But this is the real lesson. So, but it's worth talking a bit about it, because, as I said, it is being used by usury defenders to say that it is somehow the Christian way to put money in the bank and make interest on it. It's definitely not, and it's wrong to use this parable as an excuse for usury in Christendom. So that's a small point that I wanted to have made here. But this is where Francis Bacon is referring to with this phrase of the hard heart. So what Francis at the time was basically suggesting, okay, people are wicked, people are sinful, so well, we'll just have to live with it. That's basically what he said, and he got his way, because yeah, well, usury was permitted. So so this was a very influential text, and it's a very important text, because it frames exactly the issue, namely there must be borrowing and lending, and because there is no usury, people won't lend, the rich won't lend. Two very big problems, and this then was basically how usury was rationalized and how it was returned into the economy of Europe. And this is where it all went wrong, because this is where capitalism comes from, and this is where banking comes from this text, and not only this text, but it is a really very crucial one, and this rationalization. And I will give you another example shortly of another very important man, but this is where it all went wrong. And you know, especially in America, there is still a lot of nonsensical thinking and adulation of capitalism. Capitalism somehow is freedom and free markets and all, you know, private or control of the means of production, all this complete baloney. In capitalism, there is no private control of the means of production, or at any rate, the control of the means of production is in a minute group in the hands of a minute group of private people that also happen to own state, but that's completely overlooked, because it is the creditors that own the economy and own the means of production, and they have done it through usury, as we have shown many ways, many times on real currencies. But capitalism has nothing to do with free markets. There were free markets in medieval era. Well, not entirely free, because people were in a much better state at the time. You know, economics at that stage was, you know, a reflection basically of our duty to work and to make a living, because this is the human condition. We have to wrest our daily bread from the earth, and every man has to do this for himself and his family. This is the human condition, and in Christendom, this was considered a shared plight of all men, and that all men should cooperate as brothers in achieving this aim of acquiring this daily bread. And there was simply a shared duty, and the idea that you could just go out and exploit people and take their income with usury, for instance, that was basically unheard of, and considered a huge blight on society, and of zero status. And of course, people love money. Okay, yeah. So Luther in 1500 accused the Christians of worshipping the moneylenders for their wealth. So it was already going on in those days. It's still very much going on today, of course. People love all the bling and all the cars and the pretty women and what have you. But it's all stolen. So with usury, with insider trading, with landlordism, and all these evil tricks of capitalism. And what is capitalism? Capitalism is simply a banking-dominated economy. That is what capitalism is. If you look at it historically, banking and capitalism rose together. came on the scene in Europe after the end of usury prohibition. And capitalism, at the heart of any capitalist economy, you will find a dominant banking sector and a central bank. That is what you have. That is what capitalism is. And if you want free markets, if you want decentralized control of the economy, decentralized control of resources, of land, of machines, of real sovereignty for common people, then the last thing you want is capitalism, because usury centralizes all wealth, always, per definition. It's the most basic math that you can imagine. It's simply he with the most money rakes in most money, has the highest income, centralizes all the wealth in his own hands. That is what usury and capitalism is. So if you want free markets, if you want decentralization, then you must hate capitalism. It's very simple. And this is a huge mind job that is, especially in America, still a big thing, because people think back of the 19th century in America, you know, when they had 10 million square kilometer of empty land, basically. We'll forget about the natives for a second, but of empty land to settle, and this brought huge wealth to common people for a century or so. But this was not capitalism. This was basically a more or less free economy, and this was absolutely not capitalism. Capitalism started in the United States basically in 1913 with the foundation of the Federal Reserve Bank. That's when capitalism really came dominant in the United States. And within 10 years, of course, or 15 years, the Great Depression started. So because depression and booms and busts, that's intrinsic in banking and thus in capitalism, and that's what you had in the US after 1913. There was already capitalism earlier because there were already a major banking sector. The Wall Street goes back much longer than 1913, of course, but there was still, especially before the Civil War, there was the basic mode of living in the United States was a man had a bit of land for himself to work the land, to provide for his family. We had that in Europe until 1500. But with first the Cromwellian Revolution, later the Glorious Revolution in Britain, the rise of Amsterdam a few decades earlier, the French Revolution. The French Revolution really was the final collapse of the old order in West Europe, preceded by what had happened in Britain, and that's when capitalism took over in Europe, and that's when living conditions in Europe started to really massively decline and deteriorate, because this is also a very important issue, of course, that in 1500 a man worked 15 weeks per year to feed his family, whereas nowadays it's 40 hours per week, and in America 50 hours per week, 50 weeks per year, which is of course 2 or 3 times worse than 500 years ago. And people think that we have progressed because in the 19th century, that was the absolute summit of capitalist power. That's when in the UK, Britain ruled the waves. Britain was a dominant naval power in the world, controlled something like a quarter of the world's landmass. And but the common man, the British common man, had to sweat for 80 hours per week in the sweatshops. So this mighty Britain was an absolute hellhole, you know. And this British Empire first enslaved the British people. That's what it did. And then with the productivity of the British people, it went out to conquer the world. That's what it did. That's what capitalism did. And because communist revolutions and fights for, you know, with unionized labor against all the capitalist exploitation by the employers, not even so much the moneylenders, but the employers, we now have somewhat better working conditions than we had 100 years ago. But that's, you know, we're still far, 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 far worse off than we were in 1500. So that gives you an idea about this meme that capitalism has made us rich. Capitalism has made the bankers rich, has made the plutocrats rich, but it has utterly exploited humanity, also very much in the West, because people you know, the progressives are now blaming white people for everything and Europeans for everything, etc. But as I said, slavery and usury had ended in Christian Europe until 1500. And it only came back when the moneylenders came back on the scene. And European peoples have been horribly, horribly, horribly exploited by these people. And that we're now somewhat better off than maybe in Africa or whatever. That's fine. But European peoples were completely under the boot of the financiers and the capitalist exploitation. And of course, we also had a couple of wars, the Great and the Even Greater War, and wars in Europe as a result of capitalism and banking. So no, but Western people have nothing to be ashamed of. The only thing that we must not do is defend these empires. The British Empire is a filthy snake, an absolute viper, which has trounced the British people forever. And it's insane that the British common people and working class people, that they somehow think that the British Empire was something good or anything. The British Empire brought nothing but pain and misery wherever it went, from Britain itself to India to China, everywhere the British came. Living standards absolutely collapsed, production absolutely collapsed, society collapsed. That's what Britain brought to the world. Let there be no doubt about this. And the United States was a better master, but of course they brought all the degeneracy, yeah? So and also terrible wars and bombing by the skies and what have you. So that was also not so much fun. But okay. But that is capitalism, and this is how it came on the scene. And this is how it happened. And what we must start realizing here is that the issue is there must be borrowing and lending, and also the people in the debt-free community must start realizing this, that they must stop pretending that there does not need to be credit. This is simply a bad mistake. There will always be a need for credit. And especially in American populism, this is an issue. And people, you know, and I'm crazy about the American populists. I know several of them personally, and they're the best people that you can ever meet. And it's a huge source of inspiration for myself. But they have always fought against the money trust. This was always central in the United States populism. But this idea that debt-free money can solve the monetary issue, and that debt itself is a core issue, this is mistaken. We can have credit, we must have credit. The issue is the interest on the credit. That is the problem. And I have all the videos here on this channel explaining this, exploring this. I've written very extensively on it, on this issue on my website. But this is what is so key to understand. There will always be a need for credit, and if it is not provided interest-free, moneylenders will provide it at interest. And some sort of a moral rejection of debt, that's simply not going to work out. And my issue here is then, and then this is what I want to bring forward very strongly here. Francis Bacon makes very clear there must be borrowing and lending, and people won't lend without interest. And that's why interest-bearing credit came on the scene. And what happened is that this exploded business because there became a lot of credit available, but because it was at interest, all the added value of the production was sucked off by the moneylenders. This is what happened. So this economic growth that we see in capitalism, and which is real enough, because there's much more production than there was 500 years ago, it all ended up in the coffers of a very tiny elite. But the people who produced the wealth, they were really thrown into absolutely detectable wage slavery of the absolute worst kind. Wage slavery is also intrinsic in capitalism, in a usury-based economy. Because before 1500, men worked for themselves. And we can say they were serfs, and their legal position was not optimal, still isn't today, because being a citizen gives you really zero rights, and you have a few privileges by the state, but that's all very has also COVID has also proven how thin that really is, because the state giveth and it taketh away, just as the Lord himself. So we can't have privileges by the state. We have innate rights, and we just can't deal with this thievery of usury. And what it has done to men over the last few centuries under capitalism is truly gross and horrendous. And my example of the British common people under the boot of capitalism in the 19th century, while Britain was playing, this mighty empire. This is the reality of it all. And now back to this point. Usury prohibition in Europe failed because it was not combined with the provision, the universal provision of interest-free credit. That's the core lesson here. And this is what I really want to drive home. Instead of interest-bearing credit, it would have been a no-brainer, even in those days, to provide interest-free credit. And how could it have been done in those days? Simply by having people pool their savings, and when there is and to provide you mutual credit from those savings. Okay, in those days you didn't have double entry bookkeeping, so it was a little more complicated in those days than it was today, and then it will be today. But it could have been done. But of course, that was not in the interest of Francis Bacon and his moneylender friends. So he put it this way, but it could have been done. And the Vatican also sadly was overtaken by the moneylenders at that time, at that stage, as I already noted. And this is where it all went wrong. And this is the crucial lesson of history. Usury prohibition is not enough. This is also why Islam failed. Islam never succeeded in providing interest-free credit for the people. They have Islamic banking, and they don't call it usury. They call it profit sharing. You know, that the moneylender gets a part of the profit when there is a mortgage, but there is no profit with a mortgage. A person is just paying off his house. But because there must be return on investment, and because the rich have this hard heart and love money so much, they won't lend without interest and or profit. Also in Islam, if you look at cost of capital in Islamic banking, you will see that cost of capital is the same as under usury in the West. So Islam failed just as much as the Catholic economy failed. The good thing about Islam is that they at least nominally keep saying that usury is a sin. And this has just disappeared in the West, and we'll be talking about another culprit who is to a large extent responsible for this. In fact, we'll be talking about him now, because I'm going back here. We have here John Calvin, prophet of the money changers. And this is obviously no secret. Everybody knows that capitalism and Calvinism are closely associated. And the reason why is simply because of this. I will first read for you a short quote from a letter to a friend. I do not consider that usury is wholly forbidden among us, except it be repugnant to justice and charity. This is what John Calvin wrote to a friend. Now, John Calvin was noted at the time, and still is, as a preeminent biblical scholar and a huge connoisseur of scripture. And he was, no doubt about it. He knew a great deal about scripture, but the fact of the matter is that Deuteronomy 23:19 states, "Thou shalt not lend upon usury to thy brother." Usury of money, usury of victuals, usury of anything that is lent upon usury. So, you know, John Calvin was lying through his teeth. And even after 500 years, it still upsets me, to be honest. It was just a scumbag, really, for doing this. Yeah. And modern economics loves John Calvin, because modern economics is, of course, bankstonomics. I mean, it's a complete garbage. I mean, I've written about this elsewhere, but nothing of modern economics makes any sense at all. It's really just complete hogwash, and it has only one purpose: to explain that you must work harder so that the parasites can become richer, and it's all for the greater good. That's modern economics. And Marxism is next. You know, how to the money lenders explaining how to solve that problem. That's basically what it's all about, because capitalism and Marxism are obviously very closely associated and from the same source. So yeah, this is Calvin, and he was very important in this respect, because Calvinism became dominant in Amsterdam, and Amsterdam was the first major capitalist empire in the world. The Amsterdam Western Bank, as I explained, was dominant in Europe for 100 years, and they brought capitalism to Europe. And okay, first Venice, but the power that was in Venice came to Europe, and from there it expanded its operations, and from Amsterdam it later moved to London. This happened in 1688 with the Glorious Revolution, and there they founded the Bank of England after that. This was a concession that William of Orange did to his financial backers, and they got concession to create the Bank of England, and that's what they did. The rest is history, as they say. But in Britain too, Presbyterianism was Calvinism. So there you have a supposedly nominally Christian philosophy claiming scripture, but claiming, oh no, usury is not really forbidden for us. That's what happened. And that's why today in America, because from London, okay, the power base is still in London, but they colonized the United States, and they created this Masonic state. The United States federal government is a purely Masonic state. And this would then become the last biggest capitalist empire that basically conquered the whole world for them, because it was based on first British and then American production that they conquered the whole world. In 1945, the United States occupied literally every country in the world except the Soviet bloc, but all of Africa, Latin America, Pacific, South Asia was all controlled by the United States. They had boots on the ground in all these countries. So that was a complete takeover by the bankers, this Second World War and the American victory. And yeah, that was basically when globalization started, etc., etc. And okay, but capitalism and America, and this is the key point, was of course Calvinist. And in America, usury is a complete blind spot. Nowadays, we thankfully have a man like E. Michael Jones, who has done a lot to wake people up to the usury issue. So that's great, of course. And via Henry Macau and myself did a lot to inform people about usury. But that was really the first interaction that people really had with usury in the United States. It was, for the rest, it was a complete fringe. And it's a complete blind spot, but usury is intrinsic to capitalism, defines capitalism, is the heart of any capitalist system, and that American Calvinism does not accept usury as a really very wicked and grave sin is a huge problem. And it's still a complete blind spot among many American Christians that I often follow myself, because they have very interesting ideas about end times and about the beast system that is being constructed. But they still do not point at usury as a core issue in Babylon. And this is simply a grave situation and a grave issue. And this is where it all went wrong with Calvin here. And modern economics, as I said, really loves Calvin, and they will say that he demolished the old scholastic arguments about the unnaturalness of money begetting money. And this is indeed very central, because usury is central to all the money making, making money with money schemes. that defines capitalism, because capitalism is all about this unearned income, and that unearned income all builds on usury, making money with money. The only legitimate form of income in Christendom is production. A man must work, and not work in the sense of shuffling papers. He must add value. Okay, if shuffling papers adds value for other people, fine, you know, then shuffle papers. But what I mean is, work is not wasting time on, you know, telling debt collectors to go this or that, there. That's not work. Work is producing stuff that other people need. And if everybody does that, then everybody will have a comfortable life. But if you have a couple of parasites like landlords and bankers first and foremost, but also all these speculators, because, and many of my friends, you know, they speculate with Bitcoin, but people, it cannot work this way. In the first place, it's a complete scam, because automatically, if you have a speculative economy, automatically all the wealth will end up with the people who have the most money. Because people, and when you allow making money with money, then the rich will have the highest income because they have the most money. It's as simple as that. If you have a 5% return, which is normal in capitalism over years, but just as a 5% interest rate is the long year average in over the last 500 years or so, and you can make the return, then obviously when you have 1 million, you will make 50,000 per year. But if you have 1 billion, you will make 50 million per year. So he with the most money always wins in capitalism. It's the most transparent bullshit scam that you can think of. But we have been adoring this, and people are now speculating with Bitcoin and with all sorts of funny coins that they're launching. And you must realize these idiots, and I call them idiots because most of these crypto launches that you have nowadays are run by Wall Street bankers, by investment bankers. And hello? And of course they like this because they print these coins and they just sell them for whatever price the market will bear. They net it all as personal profit. And then people go out speculate and hoping that the rate will go up. Yeah, whatever, you know. I mean, it's just crazy. The last few weeks, you had this coin named after some sort of a dog or whatever. In no time, it had a 50 billion market capitalization. No added value whatsoever. It's a pure Ponzi scheme, pure speculation, and obviously it makes the crypto community look absolutely ridiculous. And ultimately, the crypto community will get destroyed by regulation for this. And in fact, rightly so, because it is complete garbage. This should not be allowed to exist. We can't have these bullshit Ponzi schemes. If you look at Bitcoin, it should be obvious if you're even a half-savvy investor, let alone a monetary reformer, let alone a truth seeker, it should be obvious to you that Bitcoin has been cornered at least 10 years ago. You have a few idiots who have become a billionaire by Bitcoin, who own maybe 100 accounts, 200 accounts, or at any rate 200 players maybe, who have several Bitcoin wallets, of course, because you can have as many Bitcoin wallets as you like. But you can read about this also in comments on my website. People have been writing about this. You can read that a very small amount of wallets control by far most Bitcoin. And what they do is what they call pump and dump. So these idiots first pump up the price with silly chats like by Elon Musk or whatever, and then when prices, when there has been appreciation for a while, they make huge profits by selling it all off. And then, of course, the retail investors are holding the bag and made look like idiots, which they are, because they shouldn't be speculating, and they should realize that always in speculation, those with the most money will, per definition, win. Furthermore, it's all insider trading. If you think there's a fair market out there, hello, please wake up. You're being had on a massive scale. Okay, a few guys, also people that I know have played a long game with Bitcoin, and they've made money off it. good for them. It's unearned income. I'm not in support of it, but we all have to live. So I'm happy for them. But please don't tell me that this is anything to do with monetary reform or fighting banking, because it's insanity, and it's going to end badly, because I strongly suspect that with the coming crash that all the cryptos will go down as well, because there's a huge liquidity squeeze coming, and gold will become money again, and that's why it will be going up. But Bitcoin is going to just get crushed, and all the cryptos. But I mean, I've never been able to make people stop speculate. So, and I don't do investment advice, but this is a fair warning, and do with it as you please. And at any rate, this whole idea that you can make money with money, which was, you know, considered filth in the medieval economy, because you know, everybody had to add value, because we were all brethren trying to make a living. So if everybody does his fair share, it will be easy. But if you have a couple of parasites coming with landlordism and speculation, raising prices through speculation, and of course usury, yeah, then you will have shortages everywhere, because you have these parasites taking in the highest incomes while producing nothing. And this is also where we have this this meme of overpopulation coming from, because you know, a few filthy rich own almost everything, and this is not a hyperbole. This is exactly what we have. We have all these billionaires, these few thousand billionaires, let alone the trillionaires that we have behind the scenes. They own everything. And they tell people, oh no, there's a shortage of housing, because we own it all, and we're kicking you out of the housing, and you go live in a smaller place, and rents must rise because market forces, you know. So and that's when you have a huge country like the United States with 10 million square kilometers, and everybody ganged up in a few mega cities, and fighting for a few square inches there with huge rents. But this is all nonsense, of course, and it's a complete rape of the commons, and this is what you have on the usury. And but there is no overpopulation. You know, if there was a fair sharing of resources, and I'm not saying that you know, everything. Far from saying that everything should be collectivized and with this fair share in a communist sense, because communism is, of course, the wet dream of the capitalists, and the enemy of the normal people. But if you have a fair economy where only production leads to profit and to income, to legitimate income, then we will have 15 weeks working years again, and good solid incomes, durable incomes for people who work and then produce, and no more wage slavery, but normal men will have their own little business. And you know, employment will be for young people who need to gain experience, for simple-minded guys, you know. No disrespect to simple-minded guys, but you always have a couple of people who have difficulty getting organized, and these people will then be able to make a living through a wage. But for normal guys, the norm will be that the men will be self-employed and will have their own small business, and that is how the economy should be organized. And if you have interest-free credit to connect all these small businesses in larger production chains, then that is, you know, a very natural organization that you will get then. But this is then what happened with Calvin, and so he played a very important role in subverting usury prohibition in Christendom, and that's why I have all these Christians in both Holland and in the United States, who will say that usury is not a sin, who will simply ignore usury, because usury is simply not spoken about either in Holland or in the United States, while it is absolutely totally central to the human condition, while it's absolutely totally mammonic. I mean, mammon is the great enemy of Christ. Christ put it very bluntly. He said, you cannot serve two masters, and you will serve either mammon or Christ or a father. So for any Christian you must be very clear about this. If you think it's normal that you can ask interest on loans of money to your own children, and they do this here on the Bible Belt in Holland, and they certainly also do it in the United States. Yeah, that's just wickedness, and you're completely off the path if you do so. And you know, it is the way it is, but I really wish that people, that Christians, especially in the United States, would become more aware of this really very completely vital and fundamental issue. Usury is of the devil, is complete, and also if you're not religious, I mean, I'm talking to Christians now, but what I'm saying now is directed to Christians. But even if you're atheist, because many people have turned away from religion exactly because it is so demonic and hypocritical. But if you're an atheist, and if you see that all the social injustice that we have, usury is completely central to it all. And if we don't solve usury, we will never solve anything. And the only way that we can solve usury, and that is also coming back to what this rant is all about, usury came back into Europe because it was only outlawed, and there was no provision, there was no mechanism for the provision of interest-free credit to normal people. So what they basically did was they practically outlawed debt and outlawed credit, because there was no interest-free credit, and lending at interest was made illegal. So, and this is simply not going to work out. So usury prohibition is not even necessary, because it's very simple. If you have a choice, if you have interest-free lending, and if you then have a money lender who says, okay, I will take 5%, while you have the option to go to an interest-free credit facility that will give you money at 0%, then obviously nobody is ever going to do any business with a money lender. So you won't even need usury prohibition if you provide interest-free credit. And the provision of interest-free credit is the solution to banking, not usury prohibition. That has failed. I've shown very clearly why it failed. You can read the whole article here on my website. It's the second article in the list at the moment. Why crucial as enough is, you can also search it when you look to see a few years later. You can search it in this bar. Why do we have usury? Because we did not have interest-free credit. And nowadays, and this is also very important to note, of course, we can create interest-free credit in many, many, many ways. There is simply, the only reason it does not happen is because society is organized by money lenders. So there's no investment capacity. I've been working on interest-free credit for many, many years now. People who have been following me know this. But you know, my main problem has always been getting money to do it. And I'm not here to talk about my personal problems, but let me tell you this: trying to keep everything paid is very difficult in Western society. Everybody is plowing away as wage slaves, me too. And combining that with trying to create a business that will be self-financing and create interest-free credit, that's not so easy. We're doing very well with the Florijn at the moment, by the way, so that I'm not complaining here, but you can understand the predicament. And it's not my predicament, I'm just explaining the problem as it is, why we do not have interest-free credit, while it is so insanely easy to create. First, people don't get it. They don't understand how totally dominated they are by the financial system. Secondly, they like the idea of making money with money, because people are stupid. I mean, we all know people are stupid. So people are engrossed by the idea of, how do I get in? How do I get my share? Instead of thinking, Jesus Christ, we're the ones paying for all this wealth while they produce absolutely nothing. That's what people should be thinking, of course. We should not be thinking, oh, how can I also become a money lender? How can I also invest in real estate? That's the stupidest thing that you can do. What we should be thinking as victims of all this exploitation is, how do we get rid of it? That's what it's about. How do we stop paying these vipers, these parasites? Because it is breaking our back. These high rents, high prices for everything, and 40% of all prices is cost of capital being passed on by producers. So 40% of everything that you buy goes directly to financiers, to landlords, to bankers. And, you know, we pay for their wealth. And if we want abundance, and if we want social justice, and if we want a fair deal for people, and if we want work to pay, and work, you know, decent work that involves producing for other people, that becomes, now it's for suckers. I mean, if you work with your hands as a man, you're a loser. Okay, you can make a decent living at the moment because you know, nobody wants to work with his hands anymore. So there's a strong shortage of that kind of folks nowadays in society. So they can make a decent living, but their status is low. People love moneylenders, and they love guys who come driving by in their big Jags, and you know, that they all stole with investing and speculation. So we need to turn this around. It won't be turned around not before everything is totally crushed, because we're too late now. We have allowed this forever, and people are stupid, as I said. So they will have to learn the hard way, and a reckoning is now coming that, you know, this is going to be the end of the West, the implosion of the debt bubble. It's going to be absolutely horrendous. We're going to pay terribly for being so wrong about economics and money in the West for the last 500 years. And a reckoning is now unavoidable. It's also necessary because people complain about the new normal, and they long back for the old normal. But the fact of the matter is that the new normal is the completely natural outgrowth of the old normal, which was already completely cancerous. And you know, there's nothing good about working 50 hours per week, 50 weeks per year just to make a living. There's nothing good about that. It's pure poverty. Pure poverty, and we are a poor people, and we think we are rich because of capitalism. So it's insanity, and this is how it happened, and this is what I hope to have, you know, got across. So we solve usury with interest-free credit, and that's the only way that it will be solved. There is no other solution. I'm out.